So I would say that my path was very non-linear. I thought that, the practical decision would be to take something in science, part of now a predictable cycle where it's struggle, effort, breakthrough. And I'm often one of few women in a lot of larger meetings that I'm in. When women are mentored, it's often on building confidence, and when men are mentored, it's usually on business acumen. We're very far from parity, which is not to say that you can't have a successful career in a male-dominated space. One coworker, and he would always say, be deferred to by project managers or people to go, can you tell us about the machine learning? And he would always say, well, that's Jayme's area of the project. He wouldn't.
Over time, how do you think the technical space has evolved meaningfully for gender equity?
Really, confidence has come from competence. To improve, you have to be content to look foolish. He basically said, as long as your goals are realistic, I've never met somebody that hasn't achieved them if they just never stop trying.
If you had to describe what empowerment means to you now, how would you look at this word now? Hey guys, it's me, Karen, and today we are at EmpowHER, which entails two words, that is empower and women. In this particular podcast, we're looking into the women empowerment side of industrial professionals who are women, and we're looking at some of the challenges they faced in their early career. In our first episode today, we have a very special guest, and she is a data scientist at a mining company, and her name is Jayme Mitchell. And before I say anything else, I will let her introduce herself.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Jayme Mitchell. I'm a data scientist at Nutrien. I've been there for about 5 years. I work on mainly computer vision projects, and in the past, I studied mathematics.
Very slay. I love that. Going straight into our conversation, maybe I should ask. So you've done your undergraduate program in math, which is super fun. Maybe I should ask, how did you pivot into data science?
So I would say that my path was very non-linear to get to both math and data science. So there's this quote by Steve Jobs that I always think about, and it resonates with me, where you can't connect the dots going forwards, you can only connect them looking backwards. And at the time, it felt like a lot of different disparate things. And now looking backwards, I can kind of see, okay, there was the first stage math and then the second stage in data science. So I always really liked math and science, but I would say equally I enjoyed arts. I was a Greystone scholar, but when I finished high school, I really did not know what I wanted to do. So I thought that, the practical decision would be to take something in science, because I couldn't really recreate the access to labs or those experiences on my own. Whereas, okay, I can do some creative projects and things like that on the side more easily. So I started off in engineering. And
whoa, I did not know that.
Yes, yeah, I know, because we have the math and the background. But I started off in engineering, and that was a big wake-up call to start, because things that came very easily in high school, they were no longer coming easily to me, and I really had to confront some humility and learning discipline and that anyone who's done anything difficult, like what that really takes to do something difficult. And then by second year, I decided that engineering wasn't necessarily the career path that I wanted to pursue, but I really loved math. So I pivoted into arts and science, and I decided I would do math, and I took a few different courses in that. And one of them was number theory. And I'm not sure if you've taken that one, but it was actually by accident, kind of, because I wanted to take cryptography, and it wasn't being offered that term.
Yeah.
So I took number theory, and then at the very early into that semester, I broke my right leg skateboarding.
Jesus, no.
I know, which seems like it's unrelated, but then I couldn't work, I couldn't drive, and I suddenly had all this free time to just study and go to office hours.
Right, yeah.
So it actually became a big inflection point on my journey. And then when I was in this class, I developed a good relationship with the professor, which led to me working as an undergraduate research assistant for him and graph theory just one summer. And then from there, it became clear that the bridge between having a career in STEM and learning a bit more about what data science was and how programming was the missing bridge for me. So then in spring of 2020, I completed my math degree. And then I did a coding boot camp in the fall. And then shortly after that, I had updated my LinkedIn and was recruited by Nutrien.
So slay.
Yeah, so that was kind of the first part of the journey. And then when I got there and was hired as an IT analyst, I was learning about different projects they had going on in data science and just was able to really take on some projects, and then slowly got more responsibilities in data science, did some self-learning, learned from my colleagues, and then was able to transition into that role fully as a data scientist in 2022, and that's where I've been ever since.
That's such an inspiring story, you know, because I feel like a lot of us will do our major and then we'll feel like that's the place we want to go. For example, if you did mathematics, people would be like, that's the only career path you could have, right? So I feel like that's a very inspiring story. Did you ever feel frustrated along the pathway?
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm not sure if this is an experience that you've had, but earlier in my academic career, a lot of things came very easily to me in high school and before. And one of the shifts that really helped me in my STEM journey and in my life in general was just getting used to that frustration and being comfortable with uncertainty. And when you stop framing the frustration and the confusion at the beginning of learning something new as a failure, and it's just part of now a predictable cycle where it's struggle, effort, breakthrough, it becomes more easy and less intimidating to take on those big tasks.
I like how you said struggle, effort, breakthrough. That's a very nice thing, right? Because a lot of us we kind of just stop in that struggle phase and we're like, oh, we can't do this anymore. But that's a really good point. Yeah. When you were growing up, I'm sure you've grown up with a lot of other women, of your age. Did you ever see other women who were willing to pursue a similar path? Or do you think it was less likely and people were a little bit reserved when it came to the technical space of things?
Well, it's interesting because data science wasn't really a path that I even knew existed growing up, and not really until university. But early on, I think I genuinely wasn't really aware of the gender imbalance in math and science. And that came a little later on, maybe more in late high school, university. But early on, I kind of had my interest, and that was well developed before I was aware of the barriers. So I think that not being aware of it really helped me build that confidence. And I recognize that's not everyone's experience, but I was lucky to always be encouraged early on.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you were growing up, did you notice any gender-related challenges? Because you said you noticed it a little bit later, right? So maybe not early on in your career or your undergraduate program or even your academic journey, but at some point when you did realize that, what do you think were some of the gender-related challenges you faced in the technical space?
I guess those, I would say, were the strongest when I was in university. And I'm not sure if this is your experience as well, but the only thing I would say that really stuck out to me is occasionally it would be insinuated that you don't have to work as hard as a woman because there are diversity initiatives. And even if it wasn't for a specific company they were calling out, it would just be a general sort of attitude. But that being said, even in my career, although I'm the only female employee on my team, and I'm often one of few women in a lot of larger meetings that I'm in. My corporate experience and my experience with Nutrien has been overwhelmingly positive and respectful. So I've been fortunate for that.
Fortunate, yeah. And I think that's really nice, right? Because I think we're lucky that we've had a workplace that actually fosters diversity and supports gender equity, whereas there can be so many other companies in the world that maybe does not think of the same way. They don't advocate for women, for example. As you were growing up, did you ever feel overlooked because of your gender? And if you ever did, like, how did you navigate that situation?
I wouldn't say that there was a specific or anything dramatic that had made me feel overlooked. Just sometimes those general attitudes, or a more subtle. I'd say more subtle than overt. And it would be just maybe that in meetings and in different environments, it sometimes is assumed that the loudest person or the most confident person is the technical authority. And this isn't strictly gender related, but in male dominated spaces, sometimes it shows up more for women. But it's important to just create different channels of communication and listen to what everyone has to say, because even if you're not a woman and you just take longer to process, or you're quieter, just having all those avenues, you're going to get more diverse input, and it will benefit everybody, I think. So that's something that I experienced on just a small level. Yeah,
because we both are women in technical spaces. What do you think we as people, or as women, could do to further advocate for women in technical spaces where they feel underrepresented?
As women in technical spaces, I think that, I guess I've mostly evaluated it in terms of mentorship, but I think that as women, if we want to support other women in our lives, the kind of mentorship that I would seek to provide is just giving the technical skills and being a sounding board. I took a professional development session, and what really sort of stuck out to me in one of the videos that we watched was that when women are mentored, it's often on building confidence, and when men are mentored, it's usually on business acumen. And I feel like that confidence is just a byproduct of feeling competent. It's easier to speak up, and it's easier to feel confident in your role if you know the business strategy, you have the technical skills to understand why things are the way they are, or why decisions are being made. So I think that as women in this space who want to support, it's sharing our experience, guiding women who are earlier in their career into places where they can learn those skills, and then being someone who will, listen and try to eliminate barriers where you have the power to do so.
I think, just to comment on that, right? Like, I very much agree with mentorship, having clubs where women come together and support each other. I think with these things, companies are able to bring women together and support women. But also, I feel that I might be wrong here, but I feel that companies think this is the way to bring women into, this space, whether it be mining, agriculture, medical, or whatever. But do you think that, apart from mentorship, the more beneficial thing is actually having women as role models in the company itself, so that they can see and feel more inspired? Because sometimes what happens is, with mentorship, this is what we as a third person think that would benefit women, right? And it's good, because you're actually helping women to navigate areas. But do you think it's more beneficial when we actually have those role models in leadership positions, and that would give more inspiration rather than just mentorship?
Oh, absolutely. This is more so, I guess, thinking from my experience and what I personally could do. And I hope to be one of those leaders one day that's visible. But I would say that visibility and representation, of course, is important. And then hearing how they've navigated their career to get to that point. Because while my experience has been positive this far in my career, I also recognize that that is not everyone's experience. And I think that the industry as a whole, there are a lot of hurdles in terms of long-term career sustainability for women. And we're very far from parity, which is not to say that you can't have a successful career in a male-dominated space, but sometimes having other women, it can provide that diverse perspective, or it can just help women see themselves in that career.
Did you ever have mentors in your life, not necessarily part of the Win-Win program, but just in general in your lives? Did you ever have a mentor, and do you find that beneficial?
So not really formally. I will have a formal mentor starting this year, but I would say that I've had countless mentors in my life, from my parents and my sister to teachers and professors, and now colleagues and leaders at Nutrien or just in the industry that have taken their time to support me and guide me when I really needed it. So not informal, but even people who I would say early in my career, my first few years of getting used to the transition from coursework to industry is a big jump, I would say, applying that. And people early on who just took the time to kind of be patient with me or highlight my voice when I maybe wasn't as confident, when other people were assumed to be the authority. I had this one coworker, and he would always say, be deferred to by project managers or people to go, can you tell us about the machine learning? And he would always say, well, that's Jayme's area of the project. He wouldn't, even though he could have answered the question, he always would defer it to me. And that really meant a lot and helped me build confidence in speaking up.
Yeah, makes sense. Since you've mentioned transition from being a student to a full-time professional, how do you think that phase was for you the first time when you went from a full-time student to full-time professional? Did you find that difficult? Did you find that easy? And what did that kind of look like for you?
I think that there were a number of things that were different, and it's not just, applying what you've learned in your computer science or mathematics courses. It's also applying the knowledge of being in a corporation, and it is a learning curve, learning what the business is doing, learning how the technology you're using is serving the greater mission of the organization, and then just really taking things that in school were very theoretical and learning how to apply them. In my experience, I've enjoyed this a lot more, because I think that sometimes in school I would go, I'm never going to use this again. It's just theory. And I have in fact used those things quite a bit. I guess specifically it would be statistics, linear algebra are really big, and a little bit of calculus, but being able to apply those in the setting and actually seeing an impact of your work and turning that theory into something useful has been really rewarding for me.
Yeah. Because I think the technical space is evolving so much, right, in recent years. Maybe looking at the beginning of your career, and now you said 5 years, over time, how do you think the technical space has evolved meaningfully for gender equity?
Well, I would say that systemic change takes time, and only being in the workforce for 5 years, that's a relatively short time to see large change. But even with that, I would say that in this time, I've seen more proactive conversation around gender parity, as well as just clearer workplace expectations. And I think that although it's small and we're far from parity, I've seen slightly more visibility of women in leadership, which feels meaningful.
I think so too, yeah. Since you've mentioned computer vision and you've done some work in automation,
yes.
When you're working on these impactful projects, how does that give you a sense of empowerment and a sense of confidence?
Well, I would say that kind of the theme for me has been that really confidence has come from competence. And when you see your technical capability grow and you are in a situation where you can make an impact and apply that technical knowledge, that has really contributed to my sense of empowerment, as well as working for a company where I align with the purpose. I think it's something that I can get behind. And when you build something with your skills that's actually useful, it's helpful to people, and you know that you have the technical capabilities to tackle these challenges, that's really led to a sense of empowerment in myself.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. As you know, like, we're at a male dominated kind of field, right? So sometimes it can be very hard to aim for a long-term career success in this kind of space. What kind of mindset shift do you think is important to be able to have that long-term career success?
Well, I think that kind of goes back to the being comfortable with not knowing, and incorporating that frustration into your learning process. And I took a intro to philosophy when I was in undergrad. Yes, and there were two quotes that I think about often. They were in the like Stoic unit, and it was, I'll paraphrase here, it won't be quite right, but it was just the fact of, you can't learn something you think you already know. So keeping your mind open and listening to other perspectives, even if I have a conception of being knowledgeable on something, there's always something I can learn. And then the other one is that to improve, you have to be content to look foolish. And I think that
I really like that.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable coming in and going, I am the least knowledgeable person in this room. And that could be because you're in a room where everybody has a PhD in mechanical engineering or computer vision, but to learn, you have to be comfortable going into those settings. So I think that shift has helped me. And then something that a mentor had told me, because if you're going into a space, you're not always going to have your first experience be positive. And he basically said, as long as your goals are realistic, I've never met somebody that hasn't achieved them if they just never stop trying.
That's a really good one. Yeah. You know, I also think there's no shame in being the dumbest person in the room, you know, like literally, because you learn so much, right? Like you might be coming in and you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to do this, but that's okay because you're learning a lot of things, right? So I think that's a very valuable thing that a lot of people feel ashamed to kind of accept, but there's no issue with it, right? Speaking of classes, when you were growing up, have you ever experienced times where you were the only woman in classes? And when you've ever faced something like that, did that ever foreshadow what's about to come in terms of your career, where you would only be, you know, one of the few women in rooms like that? And did that ever scare you at any point?
I wouldn't say so. Often in classes in university, I don't think I was ever the only woman, but I was one of few. I was on the Math and Stats Student Society when I was in school, and there was Jen, she was a stats major, and Anna was a math major, and then the rest of the people in the society were male. But it was not something where I was the only woman, or that I thought about a lot. I definitely noticed that there was not parity, and you can see that, but I think that it's not often highlighted, and especially in my career when it's just treated as normal, it's not treated as a different thing, that you're going for this pursuit as a woman. I think that helps contribute to not feeling othered and not feeling like this is something that I don't belong in.
Now, when you're at this stage of your career, if you had to describe what empowerment means to you now, how would you look at this word now compared to maybe when you were, 5 years ago when you just started your career?
I would say that my sense of empowerment comes from, I think, a mix of three things. It's first of all having the competence and having the technical skill. And then the second part would be having the context to do the work that you need to do, and being trusted to do that. So as long as you have the information you need and you know that you're being trusted in to deliver and you have the skills to deliver, those situations are where I would feel the most empowered.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I think I agree with you, right? Like, I think I obviously don't have as much exposure and experience that you have, but I think I relate to the way that you've described empowerment. So I very much agree. For all those women who might be willing to go into technology or mathematics, but maybe they're a little bit afraid and they're unsure if they want to kind of proceed to this pathway, what would you tell them now when you're almost, when you've already overcome a lot of those challenges in your undergraduate journey?
I would say to them that just because it might feel intimidating or uncomfortable, it does not mean that you don't belong, and don't let any negative experiences or hesitancy deter you, because if you keep trying, again, there are a lot of people that are willing to help. It might not be everybody, but there are a lot of people who can help you when you need it and guide you along your journey. And I guess just even when the destination isn't completely clear, you haven't decided exactly what you want to do for a career, just follow your curiosity and keep building skills and get comfortable with that uncertainty.
Yeah. Has there ever been like a quote that has stuck with you for like your entire life? So for example, for me, I'm a book reader. I love books.
Okay, yes.
I don't know if you know Colleen Hoover.
I have not read her books, but many of my friends. Yes, yeah.
So I read one of her books. I think it's called It Ends With Us. And there's it's not a quote, but it's more like a phrase that says, keep swimming. And it's basically how the character goes through a lot of emotional turmoil. And she keeps on saying to herself, keep swimming. And that's kind of stuck with me. So whenever, I'm going through a particular phase, when, anything in life, whether that be personal, professional, whatever that might be, I always think about that I have to keep swimming and there's always going to be lights at the end of the tunnel. Do you ever have something like this that has motivated you, whether that be a phrase, whether that be a quote of someone else or something of your own that you keep telling yourself and remind yourself to get through a difficult phase?
Get through a difficult phase?
Or any phase, really.
Yeah, not exactly I guess the quote, the Stoicism quote, I think it was, I'm going to say this name wrong, Epictetus or that, and then the Steve Jobs one. But one, actually, I think you know this, but I like to play tennis a lot. And there was one interview with Rafael Nadal, who is one of my favorite players. He's retired now. But they were asking him, this other player was saying, oh, if I was able to try as hard as you on a point, what could I achieve? And he goes, if doesn't exist. And I like that. I think of that often because I go, when I start comparing or going, if I had this or if I did that, and I have to bring it back and go, what is in my control? And not to say that, pull yourself up by your bootstraps because there aren't systemic barriers. Of course there are. And of course you need to take those into account. But I also think that I go, okay, what is in my control? What is out of my control? I can't ask myself just if it were to be this way or if it were to be that way. I just need to focus on
the present.
Yes, exactly. What is in my control. Capacity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of initiatives that are happening for women here in the city. For example, we have the mentorship program. There's a lot of other clubs that, companies kind of foster. I think my podcast is trying to do that 1%, where I'm trying to make my contribution of advocating for women and vocalizing by speaking about it with people from different industries, right? So I think I treat of my podcast more like a platform where, people can see what those actual challenges people have faced in their early careers, how they've evolved, and what challenges that they've had. If you treated this as a platform, and if you had to give one message to the audience, whether that be professional, career stuff, or personal stuff, what would be that one message you would want to convey?
My one message,
I'll say, it could be anything.
Yeah, I'll say it to the platform. Say, be patient with yourself. If you don't have expertise from day one, that's okay. And that struggle is not failure. It's usually a sign of growth. So just keep going and be gentle and patient with yourself in the beginning.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years?
Yes.
Well, I guess it's interesting because when you think of 5 years as a whole career or as a period of time, I don't think of it as that long of a period. But then I think about how much growth and has taken place in my last 5 years. That's the whole time that I've been with Nutrien. So I guess I'm just going to keep developing those skills. I would love to increase my business knowledge.
I want to say thank you so much, Jayme, for being a part of this podcast. This means so much. I think I've learned so much more about you and your career and the overall growth you've had. So I'm really grateful for you to say yes to this podcast. And it means so, so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to give you 2 gift cards, actually. So this one's from Delish by Tish.
Wonderful.
So they do like soups, cheesecakes, and you know where they are.
Yeah, they're great. I love
great
Delish.
People. This one is holistic physiotherapy and wellness.
Okay.
So they do really good massages, therapy stuff, which I think would be really nice. And they have a staff who works there, Ashley Preet. And she is an amazing therapist, and she does such great massage therapy. So if you ever get a chance, do visit them. I think they do amazing work.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, with that, actually, before I even say anything, do you have any last words for the audience?
Not that are coming to mind right now. Just thank you for having me. This is a very cool series that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing all the episodes.
Of course, yeah. I'm going to say thank you so much, Jayme, for being a part of this first episode of my podcast dream. I can't thank you enough for being like the first one for this podcast. I think it means so much, and it's kind of set the tone for the entire 9 episodes. So I'm very excited for everyone to see this episode and see how amazing you are as a person. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, don't forget to leave it at the bottom of the podcast, and me and Jayme will help to co-reply. And with that being said, we're going to say bye.